the West Bank, calling for the creation of a Muslim alliance to combat the threat.
Israel already declared that they will not be satisfied with occupying Gaza alone. All Islamic countries should also take a common stance against the Israeli occupation, where it is uncertain when it will cease. We say that the only step that will stop Israel's arrogance, Israeli banditry, and Israel's state terror is the alliance of Islamic countries.
In brief, Tesla and SpaceX boss Elon Musk is on track to become the world's first trillionaire by 2027. The 53-year-old is already the world's richest man, with an estimated fortune of $237 billion. And China's banned foreigners from adopting its children. It comes as hundreds of American families have pending applications to adopt a Chinese child, and follows similar steps taken in other countries such as Denmark, Norway and Russia. This has been Matt Boyland with your TNT News Brief. I'll be back with more at the top of the next hour.
Sometimes a car comes along that changes everything, with innovations never thought possible and features that make you wonder, how did people survive without this? This is that time, and this is that car. This is the world's first VW. Equipped with transparent doors to eliminate reasonable suspicion, whatever that means. A 10-2 steering wheel that keeps hands visible at all times. We remove the glove box so there's no confusion about what the driver is reaching for. With a touch of a button, the ultrasonic biometric scanner displays the license and registration of the driver to ensure contactless exchange of information. With no trunk, nothing can be concealed, so therefore, there is nothing to search and seize. To ensure you will never be mistaken for breaking the speed limit, we've installed limited edition airless tires. And we removed the engine because, honestly, why risk it? DWB, the first vehicle of its kind, where the safety feature is the car itself.
I have a feeling these are the suspects in question. The two occupants look like the people involved in the armed robbery. I'm approaching the vehicle. Request backup. The driver matches the description because of a wide-set nose.
I said, could she die? And the doctor said she could. It was so scary.
When I started clawing at my neck and trying to breathe, and I thought, what are we going to do if I die here? How's everyone going to go on?
When someone's gravely sick or injured in the bush, they rely on the Royal Flying Doctor Service. But now the Flying Doctor needs your help to fund vital medical equipment and supplies. Please search Flying Doctor online to give a regular gift of just $10. You can help equip the Flying Doctor's teams to respond to any emergency anywhere. Search Flying Doctor online. Become a part of the Royal Flying Doctor Service and help save lives in the bush.
When the world's endangered animals need help most, when their lives are at greatest risk, when they would otherwise be lost, the International Fund for Animal Welfare is there, taking action to rescue the animals we love, to protect them and their threatened natural habitats. But the danger to animals the world over is growing, and the need for your help has never been more urgent. On land, you'll help stop poachers from threatening and killing elephants and big cats for the illegal wildlife trade. In the oceans, you'll help rescue dolphins, whales, and seals from deadly hazards. And you'll help rescue, rehabilitate, and release vulnerable animals when disasters strike. Here at home and around the world, we can't do this work without you. See how you can help animals and people thrive together at joinifall.org.
From national security to global corruption.
This is the Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, it's just gone 12 noon in London, 7 a.m. in Philadelphia and around the world. It's time for the Muckrakers. Well, a very warm welcome back to the Muckrakers with me, Andrew Eborn. And as always, here on the Muckrakers, we pledge to continue tackling the most pressing and controversial news issues of our time. Our mission is remaining to provide more light and less heat in our unwavering quest to uncover the truth and to inform, educate and entertain with dignity and respect. And it's important that we shine a spotlight on these issues because a lot of people in the media are not doing so. So today we're going to shine another spotlight on Gaza and the horrendous situation that continues to go on there. And to help me do that, I'm joined by TNT Titan Basil Valentine and also delighted to be joined by Taghrid Al-Mawed. Nice to have you both on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be with you.
A real pleasure. And Taghrid, I know we were having problems with your background, so that's why we have a little picture of a little bird, it seems to be, but quite appropriate, a bird of peace, is that right?
Yeah, I'm afraid.
Oh, don't be afraid of the bird of peace. We always love a bird of peace. Well, let me fill you in because Taghrid describes herself as a political activist, a former parliamentary candidate, event organizer, and nature lover. So the bird of peace is quite appropriate, really.
Yes, it is.
So let's start off with you, because I know you're also part of the Workers' Party. George Galloway, I've been on his show a few times and everything. Tell me about a bit more about your background so people can find out about you.
Well, I am a former Workers' Party member. I am more of an independent right now. My background, I was, I'm a Nakba survivor with my family. We are the Palestinian diaspora in Lebanon, and I would like to keep raising awareness about the narrative and the history before even 1948 and what is it 7th of October, and making people more aware of the truth.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, and I always say here on the Muckrakers, on TNT generally, we don't want to take sides. What we want to try and do, our only mission, if you like, is to shine a spotlight on the truth. And people come with their own prejudices and so on and so forth. And we always try and do that with respect and to say, look, here's a platform where people can talk firsthand about their experience. So I wanted to just deal, if I may, let's start. We'll go back to the history in a bit, but there's been some terrible reports in the last 24 hours. Not least, there was a number of Palestinian citizens reportedly suffocated earlier today after breathing in tear gas fired by Israeli soldiers at the Hamra military checkpoint in the Jordan Valley. And I want to read this report because it's coming in as we speak. It's from the Palestinian news agency, Wafa. It's not yet been independently verified, but I'll read it anyway with that caveat. And a Wafa correspondent reported that the occupation fired tear gas bombs at citizens while they were waiting to cross the checkpoint, causing a number of them to suffocate. The Israeli occupation forces also obstructed citizens' passage through the checkpoint yesterday and fired tear gas bombs at them. The checkpoint has been seeing military reinforcements and repeated closure of citizens' movements for months. The Hamra military checkpoint is a main link between the cities of the West Bank and the Palestinian Jordan Valley and is one of the main checkpoints between Tubas and the Jordan Valley. However, Israel controls the movement of citizens through it. Let me get your comment on that first of all.
Well, first I would like to say that when they say Gaza or Palestinian territory or whatever, no, it is all the borders of Palestine is controlled by the Zionist entity. So no one is in charge there other than them. There's no power for the Jordanian coward government or the Egyptian coward government to control any of this. And this is, I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed with the Muslim Arab leaders for standing still, even they seeing some of their Muslim Christian Palestinians are being treated this way. My comments is that I would like just to point out for how long people will treat Palestinians as like second-class human or not human. And when we look at the European countries, which is civilized nations, etc., they accept this to happen to us for 76 years. Yes, that's...
Yeah, and you mentioned 76 years, and I always like to put these things into historical context so people can understand, because as you say, this didn't start on October the 7th. We talked about those horrendous events. Fill us in a bit on the history.
You want? Okay, I'll give you a quick summary. The arrival of the European settlers, the invaders, started the early 1870 and year 1880. And the murdering of the Palestinian started in 1936, and the occupation and destroying the villages, more than 400 villages, started in 1948, and which I call the ongoing Nakba and ongoing genocide. And that's why me and my father and my Palestinian in the diaspora are Nakba survivors.
Right.
That's
okay.
Yes.
Let me bring in Basil Valentine here as well, just to comment on because I know you're on his show later as well. Basil, what's your take on the horrendous news we're getting forward and putting into historical context as well?
Well, it's just such a dreadful Groundhog Day of the very worst kind. You know, year after year, decade after decade, as Taghrid said, the international community sits by and allows Israel to commit massacre after massacre. The situation in the West Bank would not be tolerated by so-called, civilized world, the so-called rules-based international order. It was happening anywhere other than in Palestine, particularly somewhere as close to Europe's borders and such a key strategic place. It was only a couple of weeks ago that the International Court of Justice, the World Court, the highest authority on the planet, set up, after the Second World War to try and ensure that, peace was maintained and that the worst examples of breaches of international law and humanitarian law were brought to book, basically. I declared that, as we've known for decades, that the occupation is illegal from start to finish. So that should really have set in motion a train of events that saw the complete dismantling and withdrawal of all Israeli settlements in the West Bank, enforced by the international community. In breach of international law, therefore, the international community takes the necessary action to enforce international law. But what's happened? Absolutely nothing. In fact, what's happened is quite the opposite. Because it knows it can act with impunity, Israel has launched a series of particularly brutal raids in the West Bank, in Jenin in particular, killing dozens of people, injuring dozens more, shooting dead an American woman, all with total impunity. We don't hear a peep out of Washington. I mean, the double standards from the State Department, who on the one hand have rushed to claim that the 6 Israeli hostages were killed by Hamas. There's no evidence of that. There's every chance that they were killed by the Israelis themselves. And yet, when the young woman was shot in the head, assassinated by a sniper for peacefully protesting against the illegal expansion of settlements, we just get the usual sad face, and ask the Israelis to conduct an investigation. Well, we didn't ask the Yorkshire Ripper to investigate his own murders, so why on earth should we ask the IDF to investigate their own assassinations when we know they kill for fun and for sport because they know they can get away with it? It's big. Why can they get away with it? Because of the strength of the lobby in the United States. So that's where we are. It's the gravest situation of our lifetimes, Andrew.
It's absolutely horrendous. Taghrid, do come back on that. I know you wanted to make some points during Basil's monologue.
What you're expecting from a terrorist entity implanted by the Western world in our land to do anything in regards their murders. And the American Turkish young lady, it's not the first one and it was not going to be the last one. We remember there is a Welsh TV producer, there was an English activist with the American... Yes, exactly. All of these individuals, no one were bothered. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And but luckily, after his murder, his family gained some compensation by the Zionist entity's government. So they're not gonna do anything in regards of anyone. They murdering people in thousand and thousand daily almost. So do you think anyone will be bothered to investigate this minor? They consider it murder. So
well, this is why I think it's so important, Taghrid. This is, as I say, we want to shine a spotlight even where other people in the media don't. And it is extraordinary. And it's a point I always come back to is that when anybody speaks out about these things, you're labelled as anti-Semitic or so on and so forth. The only thing that we're doing here on TNT and the Muckrakers in particular is we're pro-peace. We want to shine a spotlight on human tragedies. We basically get desensitized to it. When it's just statistics, we forget behind every single death. Every single death, there's family, friends, communities, and it's an absolute tragedy. And we should never, ever, ever lose sight of humanity.
Exactly. Yes, and let's say about why, like, when they're not doing anything, some of them are scared of being labeled anti-Semite, that's nonsense, because every time I give a speech or I start conversation, I will say, I'll give a big shout out for my Jewish comrades and any person who is pro-Palestine. And secondly, I would say I am a Semite and I speak Semitic language. So to label me as a Semitic and I am a Nakba survivor, it's unacceptable. The other things about being called anti-Semitic, it's become like an honor to be. If I was called by one of the Zionist lobby, the Zio trolls in the UK, that's mean I'm strong enough and they are afraid of me. I've been labeled. There's been articles written about me. Even the Jerusalem Post been supported by the groups here, which big numbers of their members are part of the government or the police. Written about me, expose my information, tag Tommy Robinson to my information, even some of them FBI, CIA, all of this malarkey, thinking I'll be intimidated or be frightened and I'll stop raising awareness, because my method of spreading the narrative is very peaceful and everyone know about is through traditional dabka, the dancing, traditional through presentation, through sharing the food, the recipe. Because all of what I share is go back to the origin of my family, where they coming from, how our dress, our dabka dancing, our food through time turned to what is called right now falafel or dabka or traditional embroidery dresses of the Palestinian women. That is the peaceful way. And I keep saying we are cousins, we're friends, we're brothers and sisters, whether we're Christian, Muslim or Jewish. And if you check on my Twitter, I'm standing with a Jewish rabbi, Palestinian Jewish rabbi down in England, standing next to each other and wishing we can go back home, walking together in Jerusalem and holding hands as brothers and sisters. So
absolutely. I would recommend that people do go and check out your Twitter feed, because you can see exactly that picture. I was looking at that just minutes before we came on air, and I think also you set out, because you're talking from personal experience, and I say we always forget the humanity in this, and I think this is what we had to do: get rid of the labels. Everybody, and I've had all sorts of people on the show already. We had Richard Pater on, who's based in Israel, giving his side of that sort of side, and both sides are hurting in this. Both sides want peace. And if we can help with that path to peace, we're going to be better. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be having a bit more detail, a deeper dive into the situation in Gaza and how we can aid that conversation. Don't touch that dial.
JDRF's vision is to create a world without type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes community is at the heart of everything JDRF does. We were founded by the Type 1 diabetes community. In the main, we are governed by the Type 1 diabetes community, we're energised by the Type 1 community, and we're accountable to the Type 1 diabetes community. It's on their behalf that we exist, and it's on their behalf that we must succeed. JDRF exists to rid the world of Type 1 diabetes. It's easy to say, but it's hard to do. So for us, that means rallying all the resources and all the people and all the organisations required to make that a reality as quickly as possible. The world's best researchers, exciting innovative companies, and the passion of the Type 1 diabetes community, then delivered through the health system so lives get better every day, day after day, until the day we find a cure. To everybody in the Type 1 diabetes community, no matter your age or stage with the disease, whether you were diagnosed recently or a long time ago, we need you to know that we are here working on your behalf to deliver a world without Type 1 diabetes as quickly as we can. Thank you to everybody who's supported JDRF in so many ways. You are making our vision of a world without Type 1 diabetes possible.
Military families often sacrifice precious time away from loved ones while serving our country. And for those with children, the separation can be especially difficult.
We were worried that with him leaving, that she would lose those connections with her dad.
Some of life's best moments happen between parents, children, and the pages of a good book. United Through Reading provides that connection.
You can watch your mom or dad read a book to you, and it almost feels like they're really there.
We ensure they remain a consistent, meaningful part of their children's lives, no matter the distance.
Just seeing Jacob recognize Daddy again after a long time just melted my heart.
And now, as we're facing greater isolation from our loved ones, United Through Reading is also available to veterans. Learn more about United Through Reading and download our free secure app at unitedthroughreading.org.
The Light is Britain's far-right conspiracy theory paper spreading hate and vicious lies. No, that's what the BBC say. The Light is the only national newspaper bringing you the real news and informed opinion on what's really going on today. You can subscribe, order copies, submit articles, and read back issues on our website, thelightpaper.co.uk, and see for yourself why the establishment are so worried about the uncensored truth getting out to people every month. The Light Paper. Not far right, just right so far. thelightpaper.co.uk.
The Muckrakers are restless. This is today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, a very warm welcome back to the Muckrakers, me, Andrew Eborn, and our guest, Taghrid Al-Mawed, and we're looking at this terrible situation in Gaza. And if you're interested in news from the Middle East, then do check out levantis.mb, which breaks down all the main stories into plain English and presents you with just what you need to know each day. And I'm delighted that the editor of levantis.me is Martin J, and he's a regular on the show. We're regularly promoting that site. Do sign up today. Have a look at it. Some fascinating insight. Taghrid, we were talking about the history and your own family's history, because as I said beforehand, people get desensitized to all this news and the horrendous images, the horrendous reports of the death and the torture about it. Until you personify grief and death, it brings it all home. Fill me in a bit more about your own circumstances in your family and what your experience has been.
Yeah, I've my childhood, it's not going to nursery and rhyme time. It was running from bombs when the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, 1982. It's trying my mom to provide food and look after her children, because my daddy was taken by the Zionist entities, terrorist groups occupying the Lebanon. And since then, I'm trying to inform the people that we shouldn't be in the diaspora. We should be back home in our homeland, what is called North of Palestine, because we need to remember, before the British mandate, it wasn't called this part of like Lebanon, where I was born, south of Lebanon. It was still called Palestine. So, but I keep saying I want to go to Safourie, where Mary was born, the mother of Jesus, which is now occupied by the Zionist entity. And Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Oh yes, it's just filling in on your family history, and because you have got first-hand experience of what it's like. I think it's very powerful on that sort of premise to explain about that sort of side. So you talked about growing up there, what that felt like as a child, and permanently, if you like, it living in fear, I guess.
Yes, we had. It is been forced like upon us fear, but at the same time it made us more determined to go back home, more determined to stand for our right to return and defend the Palestinian to be free from the occupation. And one of the things, my experience, and when I growing up, I've realized there is the lack of knowledge about the Palestinians in the diaspora, and that we exist, and what genocides, massacres we've been through, not only in the occupied Palestine, like Sabra and Shatila, Tal Za'atar, at the camp of Nabatieh, who've been wiped out of the earth, the face of the earth, and how people don't understand the Palestinians, wherever they were born, whether in the occupied Palestine or outside, they are a target of the Zionists. They want to make sure the less number of us there to stand for our rights as a human, to be treated as a human and go back home. I wanted to tell people the way we were brought up, that the occupation plans to extend. It's not only Palestine, it's Jordan, it's a part of Lebanon, part of Syria and Iraq, and it's bigger than what people think. It's just the map of Palestine. So that's how we were brought up, that we need to defend ourselves and make sure they stop calling us terrorists. Because when I was a child, I was labeled as a terrorist, and some people in Lebanon, which they are not lots of Lebanese are like this. No, the vast majority are amazing people. Some were pointing at me while I'm 3 years old to the Zionist entity soldier there, pointing out that's the Palestinian, that's the terrorist. So we had a duty to and like making sure people know about us, that we exist and we are not terrorists. We are civilians, women, men, and children. And we need to be treated equally, which we don't have it human rights in Lebanon.
Yeah, and it is so important. As I say, we don't take any side. So I should ask you just for clarification. There's obviously a big difference between Hamas and Palestinians generally, and I think Palestinians want to live in peace, just as a lot of Israelis want to live in peace. Do you condemn the attack on October the 7th?
Well, what I condemn is the occupation. And I condemn that if my land wasn't occupied, there was going to be no creation of Hamas. Hamas was created in the 80s, and the occupation, it was, like we said, in the 40s. So if the Zionist entity were not murdering and committing crimes against millions of Palestinians, there was no reason for Hamas to be created. Hamas wasn't going to be there if the occupation didn't exist. And as we know, at the international law, it gives the Palestinians or any human the right to defend themselves. So the resolution 3743 of 1982 give the occupied people, whatever nation they are, to resist, including armed struggle. So the point is, why people not condemning the Zionists before the 7th of October and the Palestinians? So for me, it's not valid. I work for peace and I love to have peace. But when you people start talking about the 7th of October and forgetting about the millions of women, men, and children being raped, and there's a documentary of the Zionist terrorist groups online. You can have a look at this documentary when they are admitting about raping of children, how they were murdering Palestinians and throwing them to fire alive. Like they are doing this. It's okay. Why people not then asking? Can I ask you, or do you condemn the Zionists doing this? I'll ask a question personally. Do you condemn the Zionists?
Oh, I'll be very clear where my position is, and I condemn murder and atrocities on both sides. I think it's absolutely appalling, and we had, as I say, we had Richard Pater on from who was based in Israel, and he was putting that side, and he says that actually more than 50% of people in Israel don't support Netanyahu. So absolutely, in answer to your question, I do condemn atrocities on both sides, and I think that's why it's so important, because it's the language of peace. And the more we can turn around and say, look, we're pro-peace. It's not about being pro either side. There have been terrible atrocities on both sides. And I always say that the first casualty in any war is the truth, which is why we need to look at that sort of side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the truth with the occupation of my land. And for settlers to come from abroad, we were living in peace, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, and another group of Samarian. I mentioned Druze. All of this, we were fine. So who created the problem? Who started the murdering civilians in the occupied Palestine? I know the British mandate has a part of it, but afterwards, when been handed our land, and like some people would say, Britain give their consent for the creation of the occupation as a land. Who gave them the power? I own my land. It's my land. I wouldn't let anyone start talking on my behalf. I'm a human. And
absolutely, yeah, and you make some very good points. It is about humanity, but just to be clear, then I want to bring Basil in, and we're being joined by another TNT Titan, James, who's in the wings as well. So we will bring him on. Just to be very, very clear, and just a yes or no answer will be fine. I understand where you're coming from. I understand your position. You've explained that very clearly. I've told you what my position is about being pro-peace and atrocities on both sides. So, and I've said that I condemn the atrocities on both sides. Do you condemn atrocities on both sides?
I condemn the creation of this atrocity. Who made this? Who created? I condemn the Zionist entity creating it.
Okay. So you're saying that the means justifies the end, basically. Yeah. Yes, Basil.
Sorry?
Well, with respect to October the 7th, lost in the fog of war has been the fact that we're given to understand, and I don't want to get arrested for speaking out of turn, that the Hamas Operation Al-Aqsa Flood was primarily designed to take Israeli hostages in order to exchange them for some of the thousands of Palestinian prisoners held without charge in what we now know to be a network of Israeli torture gulags. That was the prime objective. Now, immediately after October the 7th, the internet was awash with rumors of beheaded babies, of mass rapes, of pregnant women being cut open, all of which turned out to be lies. 100% fabrications in order to justify the genocide we now see taking place. Further, thanks to the great work of journalists at the Grey Zone and elsewhere, it's become clear that many, if not most, of the Israelis that were killed on October the 7th were killed by the Israelis' own forces. 28 Apache helicopters used up all their ammunition, including Hellfire missiles, to kill anybody that looked like they were heading back to Gaza, regardless of whether they were Israeli or Palestinian, under the so-called Hannibal Directive. So we don't know the numbers. We probably never will know the number, the percentage of the 1,200 that died on October the 7th that were killed by Israeli gunfire or rockets. But it's a stone cold fact that an awful lot of them were. And the last point to make is that I want to make about October the 7th is that let's not forget, prior to October the 7th, the Gaza Strip was ringed by spotters, basically spies, watching via camera and through binoculars everything that's going on in Gaza. Remember, it's basically a large prison camp prior to October the 7th. And some of these spotters were captured by Hamas because obviously they were the people closest to the border on October the 7th. And some of them, I believe, remain prisoners. Now, The problem that the Israeli government have got is that they may have a very different version of events of October the 7th to the one being peddled by Netanyahu. Basically, it would appear that they were passing up information up the line to the Israeli government that Hamas were preparing for something because they saw them conducting rehearsals for October the 7th in advance. Yes. But nothing was done with that information. The implication, or rather the suggestion being, that certainly elements of the Israeli government were perfectly happy to allow October the 7th to happen so that they could double down on the slow motion genocide of the last 20 years and increase its pace dramatically. Hence, one of the reasons why Benjamin Netanyahu may have no interest in a prisoner swap and is more than happy to see Israeli prisoners die isn't only because of the propaganda he can get out of it in terms of continuing to paint Hamas as subhuman monsters, but also because some of those prisoners may be some of the spotters who would tell the world a different story, that they were trying to warn the Israeli government about an impending semi-invasion by Hamas, and that the government did nothing about it. And obviously that would mean not only the end of Netanyahu's career, but possibly criminal charges, as if he doesn't face enough already.
Well, he's certainly got a lot of those, and the point we have made several times on the Muckrakers, and what I firmly believe is that there are lots of questions about what actually happened on October the 7th. We have apparently what the Israeli security service is supposed to be the most informed in the world, and all sorts of suggestions. I want just to bring in, because we are being spoilt today, and just before he does his show at the top of the hour, we're joined by another TNT titan, James Freeman, who's patiently been waiting in the wings. What's your take on this, James?
Yeah, I think everybody knows my view, and that is that I think October the 7th was a false flag attack of some sorts. I think it's clear that the Israeli government had lots of warnings that this was going to take place. And look, I've got no proof of this, so this is just my opinion. But when you look at the facts, that this is the most heavily fortified border wall in the world. They've got all sorts of radars, lasers. I mean, if you go within feet of that wall, like many people, thousands have actually experienced over the past 20 years, you get shot. So how they were able to penetrate multiple points in of the wall is just beyond me. And then, of course, you've got these flimsy paragliders, probably the easiest thing in the world to shoot down with a gun, were able to just fly over the wall. To me, all of that at face value just seems impossible. And I think it is because the Israeli government allowed those attacks to take place to set the pretext for what is going on now.
And certainly lots of questions. I'm going to come back to you, Taghrid, after the break. After the break, we're also going to be doing a deeper dive into what a potential solution might be. I'm always keen to see if there's any way that we can help the dialogue with a path to peace. Don't touch that dial.
I said, could she die? And the doctor said she could. It was so scary.
When I started clawing at my neck and trying to breathe, and I thought, what are we going to do if I die here? How's everyone going to go on?
When someone's gravely sick or injured in the bush, they rely on the Royal Flying Doctor Service. But now the Flying Doctor needs your help to fund vital medical equipment and supplies. Please search Flying Doctor online to give a regular gift of just $10. You can help equip the Flying Doctor's teams to respond to any emergency anywhere. Search Flying Doctor online. Become a part of the Royal Flying Doctor Service and help save lives in the bush.
Many pollution sources can affect the air you breathe, from power plants and vehicles to dust and wildfires. Knowing more about local air quality can help you protect your health. If you're thinking about buying an air sensor, EPA has a series of videos to help you get the most out of it. Learn how EPA collects and uses regulatory data, how EPA communicates health messaging, and how to interpret the readings from your sensor. Visit epa.gov/air-sensor-toolbox.
The Muckrakers are restless. This is today's News Talk.
TNT.
Well, a very warm welcome back to the Muckrakers and me, Andrew Eborn, and joined by two TNT titans, James Freeman and Basil Valentine, and Taghrid Al-Mawed, who's been putting a very clear views on the Palestinian situation, putting that view forward. And as I say, we always want to shine more light and less heat on this. Before we look at the potential path to peace, I want to just talk about these polio vaccination campaign in Gaza, which is due to start on the 10th of September and is lasting until the 13th of September. What's your take on that, Taghrid?
Sorry, it started before on Gaza, before the 7th of October. And I would just want to add some points that recently the German ambassador in Tel Aviv, he confirmed that they made lies about the rape, beheaded, etc. And plus there is now videos you could watch online, anyone could have an access to see that the occupation attacking their own people, and so people now can have an easy access to see the truth. It just, they need to dig for it. About Gaza, I need again to repeat that it started much longer.
Certainly at the beginning of the show, you put it into historical context. I was talking about the vaccination of children in northern Gaza following Gaza's first polio case in 25 years. And the campaign's goal is to reach 640,000 children in total. They've talked about a temporary pause in the fighting between Hamas and Israel has been arranged to allow the campaign. What's your take on that?
I think it's not only about vaccination as well. It's about the starvation. It's about murdering and burning and the weapons they are using. Have you seen the children burned or when they it caused them disability, etc. So I'm not sure why we start think of just a minor thing from the bigger picture instead of just thinking of this vaccination. Why don't we think about stop this genocide? But I would like my Palestinian children, my Palestinians brothers and sisters to be treated just like any other person, which is stop the genocide and let them go back home and stop the occupation. It's frustration because, when I see the children being murdered, cut to, like just yesterday, holding a girl, she's been sleeping and she's shredded to pieces. Do you think this is fair? Do you think I'll then think of vaccination? Or I think of anything other than ashamed of myself that I'm not doing more, like ashamed of the Arab Muslim leaders, they're not doing more, and ashamed of the whole world, like they are still standing still, doing nothing towards the Palestinian in Gaza, people in Yemen, in Congo, in Somalia, in Sudan. All of this, while we're still accepting. So it goes bigger than just a vaccination, thinking of vaccination.
You make some very valid points, and the images that we've seen of starvation and absolute devastation is horrendous. James, as you've just joined us, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think this is akin to giving a paracetamol to somebody while you stone them to death. Absolutely astonishing, really, that they're talking about this, and yet it's fine. You can carry on bombing them. Nobody really, we hear in the West, in the US, in the UK, and other countries in the West, politicians kind of saying, well, Israel has the right to defend itself, and maybe going as far as saying, we wish they could minimize the civilian death toll, but nobody does anything to stop it. I mean, the UK has stopped selling, I think, 30 contracts for arms out of a total of 300, which is just a political gesture to bring on side or to appease those in the UK, particularly within the Labour Party, who want a proper ceasefire. So, yeah, I find it's quite astonishing that the UN is talking about vaccination of kids for polio, but carry on bombing them because nobody's actually doing anything.
Yeah,
I mean, at the weekend, believe it or not, Laura Kuenssberg, the BBC political editor, interviewed Keir Starmer, attacked him basically from the right, saying that Britain was upsetting the Americans by withholding these 30 licenses, less than 10% of the total arms exports currently extant to Israel. And that, really he should be in lockstep with Washington, which is continuing its absolutely unregulated, full-throated support of the genocide. I thought this was a new low even for the BBC. And to make matters worse, Starmer's response was that it was not a policy decision. Oh, no. I mean, we are talking about the man who said that Israel had the right to cut off water and foods to the Gaza Strip right the way back in October of last year. No, he said it was a legal decision that had caused him. So in other words, lawyers from the Foreign Office have gone to Starmer and said, look here, you might be complicit with genocide here, UK aiding and abetting war crimes and crimes against humanity. So you better make some gesture towards withholding these arms exports to Israel. And Starmer has responded by saying, I'd rather not. I don't want to change policy. But if legally you say I might end up in the dock, or we could be breaching international law by continuing to supply absolutely everything Israel wants to eviscerate the entire population of Gaza, then I suppose we better do something. I mean, it goes from bad to worse. But to go back to the point about the polio vaccines, why are children getting polio? Why have so many children in Gaza got skin diseases? Answer, because they're drinking dirty water that includes raw sewage out of puddles, because the entire water supply has been completely destroyed by the Israelis. And I want to draw attention to a more recent letter. I mean, the official death toll is now of 41%, but it's likely that the death toll is more than double that. A figure of 92,000 has been mentioned. But other people are suggesting that the death toll could be nearer 400,000, with only marginal exceptions. This is a recent eyewitness report. Everyone in Gaza is sick, injured, dead, or one of those. This includes every national aid worker, every international volunteer, and probably every Israeli hostage. Every man, woman, and child. Malnutrition, even if not full-on starvation, is widespread. Every child that they encountered, both inside and outside hospital, had watery diarrhea and was suffering from malnutrition. Although we see some pictures of the worst atrocities, mostly, of course, on social media, because corporate media does not like to show the full extent of the horror, which is why Israel has continued to refuse to allow journalists into the Strip, because people would see that they have literally created hell on earth. And populations around the world, for all that they're browbeaten into believing that even the mildest criticism of Zionism is somehow anti-Semitic, populations around the world will be rightly outraged by what is the worst humanitarian disaster of our lifetimes without exception, and it's entirely man-made. So, we're in a global constitutional crisis, frankly, because the ICJ have ruled that this is a plausible genocide. They've ruled that the occupation is illegal. We're still waiting for the arrest warrants from the ICC for Netanyahu and Gallant. Frankly, dozens of others should be arrested as well. Why aren't those arrest warrants forthcoming? Could it be because the United States and Israel are illegally pressuring judges at the ICC not to issue those warrants in typical gangster fashion? Who knows? But this is a big problem for the world, and it's not going away anytime soon on the current timeline.
Taghrid, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, it's just the last about the relation between the US and the American, which is, yes, they want the Congress, the US Congress to press South Africa to drop the ICJ genocide case. So they're not taking anything seriously. It's just, they think it's just paper and decision made to convict or, not convicting people. So I mean, they are just disrespecting the Palestinian as a human, so they'll keep behaving what they are doing, committing crimes.
Yeah. And it's so important to call it out, as I say, on both sides, and that's what I'm keen to do. Taghrid, we're always interested in personal experiences, and I say we get desensitized. Are you in contact with people in Gaza at the moment?
Yes, well, I am, and anyone could be in contact with people via TikTok, YouTube, any other method of communication. And yes, people are struggling there. There's everything is expensive. They expect to be murdered any second. They can't predict where is the next bombardment will start. And I've already spoke during one of the protests I participated. I was saying in my speech that after the 7th of October, in a few days, I think it was, when I said this attack, it was planned for, looking for a reason to murder more Palestinians, to have less number to deal with, and to have more lands of Palestine, and to get of Gaza, and to get the natural resources such as the oil, whatever, and the expensive prices of the land over there. And I've mentioned the quality of the water, and how they are making people go hungry, and lots of other information, which is repeatedly the Palestinian been living since after the 7th of October. So there is nothing new there about what they are going through. It's a bigger number. And the people of Gaza since 2007 or 2005, they've been living this. Now and then they bomb their houses, and they bomb families. And there's lots of children been murdered since Gaza been besieged by the Zionist army.
Okay, I'm very keen. We've only got a few minutes left, but I want to try and see, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is what the road to peace might look like. What do you think peace would look like?
It's when the Western leave us alone, and the Muslim Arab leaders stand on their feet, and they become people, separate religion, the Judaism from Zionism. When the Palestinians, or the people, the native who were living there, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, will live in peace away from the Zionist ideology, this racial discrimination ideology. That's when peace will happen.
Is that a one-state solution, a two-state solution? What do you see?
It's one-state solution. I don't believe in two-state solution. What's two-state solution? Two small pieces of land, West Bank and Gaza. What about us in the Nakba survivor in the diaspora? Where are we gonna go back? My homeland, my village. Where we're gonna? It's under the Zionist power. So I don't accept to be living under the occupation. I wish I have the right to defend myself. It's one state for Palestinians. Jewish, Muslim, and Christian lives equally. Whereas there's a space. I'll ask you this question. Do you think two neighbors will live next to each other peacefully when one of your children murdered the other son?
You make a very good point. It's a point we have made several times on the Muckrakers, is that effectively what you're doing is, if you kill one member of a family, it goes on for generations. James, let me get your take on it. Last minute, James.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the two-state solution, well, it's been dead for years now. There's just too many people that have settled on Palestinian land, even if Israel agreed to, which it's never going to do. I think moving all of these Israeli settlers is just too big a problem for Israel and the international community to deal with. Plus, I agree with what's been said about the two little strips of land as well. That's not a state. So I think that is the only solution. How the hell we get there is another question, though.
Well, I think talking about it. Yeah, Basil. Yes, Basil.
Well, the problem with the one-state solution, I'm all in favor of it, is that unfortunately Zionism is a maximalist ideology. That's why they took the place over in the first place. They consider, the Israelis, Jewish Israelis, consider that the whole of historic Palestine isn't simply theirs, but it's theirs alone. That's the key thing. They have no wish to share it with any indigenous population at all, which is why the ethnic cleansing and genocide continues apace. So unless there's a fundamental sea change of attitudes within Israel, the one-state solution is sadly going to be as difficult to achieve as the two-state solution.
Okay. Margaret, Taghrid, the final word to you, 30 seconds.
No, I think I said peace can be fulfilled in what it was called Middle East right now. If the Western world leave us alone, go back to their own spaces, and we can live peacefully like we were before in Palestine, Syria, and Jordan, etc.
Okay. And as I always say, jaw, not war. The more we can shine a spotlight on what's happening, the more that people will realize the atrocities of war on both sides and encourage both sides to try and find that peaceful solution. Thank you very much, as always, to James and to Basil. And Taghrid, thank you very much for joining us. And I think we're going to be able to see you tonight as well on Basil's show. James is coming right up after this. And you can join me again tomorrow here on the Muckrakers. And during the week, we've got some more great guests, including Elon Musk, who's making a return appearance every Thursday. Martin Ray as well will be, Martin J rather, he'll be back with me tomorrow when we've got a 9/11 special. Do join me, Andrew Eborn, then. But for
If you missed this hour, simply go to episodes at tntradio.live. Now, TNT Radio News.
With your hourly news brief, I'm Matt Boyland. A new report out of Washington has blamed the US's disastrous exit from Afghanistan on US President Joe Biden, accusing him of ignoring a slew of warnings which ultimately led to the deaths of over a dozen American troops. The US abandoned $7 billion worth of weapons and equipment and left behind over $50 million in cash and a trove of classified documents when its forces fled Afghanistan in 2021. 13 US servicemen were also killed in a suicide bombing at Kabul airport during the evacuation. The scathing 600-page report from the US House Foreign Affairs Committee concluding the catastrophe could have been avoided if the president had only listened to his advisors.
Colonel Seth Crumrick, Chief of Staff for Special Operations Command Central, during the military retrograde, reiterated